This podcast was brought to you by Wiseau Voice Coaches. Join today to start creating a voice that no one will ever forget. Oh, hi, doggy.
Hello, and welcome to Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review discussion show with me, the Jonin Monkey.
And me, Sven the Crusader. Happy end of summer, beginning of school, everyone.
Yeah, well, by the time this goes out, people will already be in school and wishing they were somewhere else. So why not imagine you're here with us? Wow, that's actually, no, stay away from us, get back!
That turned out way more awkward than I think it sounded in our heads.
Yeah, so yes, we probably should start barricading the doors, but in the meantime, let's just move quickly on into our first section, which is...
Q&A!
This is the section where we answer questions from the audience. If you'd like us to answer your questions, either leave them in the comments or send them to me via Twitter with the hashtag MBQuestion.
Our first question comes from the Infinity Zero.
What are the most annoying cliches you've seen in media?
Oh, well...
Do you want the long answer or the short answer?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, off the top of my head, I can give you amnesia stories just because of how repetitive they get, and 9 times out of 10, the payoff is never worth it when they do find out your memories.
I know what you mean. Twilight Princess springs to mind.
It also doesn't help that said amnesia often leads the character to do incredibly stupid things. Case in point, Shadow the Hedgehog. Yes, aliens are planning to destroy the entire world, but who cares? I don't know who I am!
You know, all I can think of in my mind now is that line from the really, really cheesy 1996 American Doc Who movie. Who am I?
Oh, whatever one I can think of off the top of my head. I really dislike imposter storylines, pretty much for a similar reason, in that it requires characters to act like idiots and basically go, you know, you have been pretty good to us, you have saved our asses many times again, but we have seen someone who looks vaguely like you go bad once, therefore we instantly assumed you've turned on us.
I concur. There's nothing like one of those storylines to make characters that were perfectly reasonable beforehand now seem like complete twits.
Oh, yeah. But before I continue my list, I'll let Sven get a word in edgeways.
Since this is fairly relevant to something we recently reviewed, namely Naruto Gaiden, family identity stories. Bits of soap opera bullshit, okay?
So you're not a fan of, oh my god, you're my father!
No, the only time I will accept something like that is if it's an awesome plot twist like Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, or my personal favorite, Tales of Symphonia, but other than that, it's usually crap.
Yeah, I will admit, those are very, very contrived a lot of the time. Especially in cases where the two of them look nothing alike, but we have to insist on it anyway.
Pretty much. Most of the time it makes no sense, and it's just panting melodrama.
Yeah, pretty much. Any others?
Are we just talking general storylines, or just things that happen?
Just cliches in general.
Okay, I'm going to direct this one specifically at shonen anime. Please stop it with the fake-out death. I know everyone knows you're not going to do it.
Oh, yeah, that that happens way too often. Especially in stuff like Fairy Tail as well, where, oh no, the adorable charm character's been killed off for 2 panels.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the absolute worst offenders of that, and I think you could agree with me here, was literally everything about the showdown with Pain and Naruto.
Oh god, oh worse, the Sharingan stuff. Aha, and I've stabbed you! No, that's an illusion. Aha, and I stabbed you! Illusion. Damn.
Yeah, basically. If you're gonna go down the tricky route of killing off one of your characters, okay, go ahead and do it, hopefully it's good, but for God's sake, eventually we know you're just not gonna do it. It ruins all the drama in your story.
Yeah, that's never been a fun one. Also, since it says any media, one thing that I really would like to see go away, scrolling levels. Those are never fun, no matter what the game is.
Oh, God. I have some bad memories of underwater levels in Mario. Speaking of which, side note, underwater levels in Mario. Carry on.
Yeah, that's another one. Any more you can think of? Or...
Well, aside from the obvious, like mentioning really, really bad damsel stories and, hey, guess what, video games and shonen manga, not really.
Yeah, it's just... But yeah, those are all the cliches I can think of the top of my head. Well, aside from fan service, that pretty much goes without saying.
Oh god, speaking of shonen anime problems.
Yeah, well, actually, you know what? Just to give some context on that, I don't mind fan service in itself, but more when it's basically when it happens to characters who it makes no sense to happen to. Like, okay, I really like Tales of Symphonia, but if Sheena is really embarrassed by the fact that she has big breasts, why the hell do all of her outfits basically expose said breasts to the world?
Oh my god, I forgot that. Okay, totally seconded.
I mean, there are worse examples, as in Point Dead or Alive 5, where even the grumpy anti-hero has plump lips seem to be permanently fixed into a smile, but anyway...
Oh god. Yeah, don't get me started on Soul Calibur. I could take that game so much more seriously if Ivy wasn't over at the corner fighting in fish wire.
So those are all the ones we can think of, which leads us into Infinity Zero's second question.
On that same note, have you ever seen a show / game / movie that took one of those cliches and made it work?
Huh. Given the nature of the ones I mentioned, no. Short answer, no. Because they're mostly shonen and anime and manga cliches, and if you find a shonen anime or manga with all of the above on those cliches, usually it's gonna suck.
Yeah. Well, on the top of my head, I would say, in regards to amnesia plots, there are one or two good ones. Like, I'm tempted to say Fire Emblem Awakening because they tended not to dwell so much on the fact that Robin had no memories, and so they kind of got to act, you know, like a normal person.
You know, I never really thought of it that way. I actually forgot that there was an amnesia story there to begin with.
Yeah, that's true. The other example was Dust and Elysian Tale, because of the unique twist regarding Dust's memories, and the fact that even before the revelation, he decided to stop focusing on his past and focus on who he is now. Yeah, those are the positive examples I can think of, so we can then move on to the next question.
Our next question comes from Roy Havenstone, who asks a question that, now that I know that it happened, I'm going to be asking myself for the rest of the day.
Will you ever forgive Nintendo for allowing Donkey Kong to be featured in Pixels?
You know, I keep forgetting Pixels is a thing.
I don't, because basically Adam Sandler is the enemy of everyone on Tumblr, so...
Yeah.
For, to be honest, decent reasons. Back in 1998 he wasn't bad, but nowadays he sucks. In every conceivable way.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I've had less experience of Adam Sandler, but I learned all I needed to know when someone showed me Grown Ups 2. So, yeah, this is kind of the reason why my reaction to Pixels is actually pretty muted, to be honest, because I looked at the trailer and I thought, oh, okay, it's Adam Sandler, it's going to be terrible. And then I saw all of the rage and fury that has been unleashed at this movie by everyone on the internet, including people like Movie Bob, who went on this hateful rant of a review that said, amongst other things, this movie was guilty of cultural vandalism, whatever the hell that means. And honestly, all I can do is look at this and go, you seriously thought this movie could be good? It's Adam Sandler.
To be fair, that's a reasonable response, because, you know, expecting anything different out of Adam Sandler is like expecting this presidential election to make sense. But at the same time, I will say this, as far as Nintendo and Donkey Kong goes, I guess bad publicity is better than no publicity.
I guess so, but I can understand when I go overall. Nintendo really didn't care. It's not like they took the main character of Donkey Kong. They just took a sprite and made it in CGI. That's really all they did with any of these characters. I mean, I get why people are so angry. I mean, there are some things like literally turning a female character into a trophy. That is actually kind of creepy, but honestly, I don't really blame any of these companies for handing the characters over because they had really nothing to lose. Best case scenario, they would get a little bit more publicity. Worst case scenario, they would get a boatload of money. And you know Adam Sandler's been constantly throwing around money. I mean, for crying out loud, they had Peter Dinklage in the main cast. You needed a lot of money to get him involved in something like this.
Yeah. Yeah, because otherwise, let's be honest with ourselves. Peter Dinklage has something called standards.
Yeah. He can pick and choose his roles now, guys. Come on.
Yeah. It's not like Peter Dinklage isn't the biggest star in TV now that Breaking Bad's over.
Yeah, so that's pretty much my reaction. I'm not really angry. I mean, can see why Nintendo did it. I mean, granted, I wonder why they're not making their own movies, but otherwise, it's just kind of muted because as long as people just stop buying tickets to see how bad it is, it's not going to do well at the box office. It'll just be one of those forgetful footnotes, and it's definitely not cultural vandalism because, well, no one's ever going to give a crap about this movie ever again.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's, again, if you go into an Adam Sandler movie expecting it to be good, you might as well be going into Family Guy expecting decent moral values.
So, I'm not angry, I'm not even annoyed, I'm just focusing my mind on better things.
That's basically the best thing to do, because hey, maybe if we ignore Adam Sandler, he'll finally go away.
Oh, we can hope. Or at the very least, disappear to Netflix.
Where he belongs, arguably.
Anyway, on to happier things. Roy's second question is,
what new feature would you like to see added or older feature return in the next generation of Pokemon?
That's an interesting one, because really, they've added what I think they needed to add. Which mostly is super training, because my god, EV training was a pain in the ass otherwise.
Yeah, I would replace that with Pokemon ME, just because, here's the weird thing, as much as I love Pokemon battling, I do love having the optional ways of interacting with a Pokemon outside of battle, because it gives them a little bit more personality, so the only features I would like to return off the top of my head are the fact that in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you had the Pokemon at the top of your squad following around behind you, and you could talk to it. So, yeah, that's something I would like to bring back alongside Pokemon ME. Maybe have it so that when you talk to it, it goes into Pokemon ME. I don't know. Oh, another thing I would like to happen, because it was in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and I've no idea why they didn't include it, the option to just turn your standard walking speed to running. Because honestly, I love the run feature, but it gets a little bit annoying having to hold down B for the majority of the walk, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I personally prefer holding down the B button from the start of the game because the running shoes annoy me. But, yeah, I guess that's just personal preference.
Yeah, that's fair enough. There really isn't much else. I mean, the only thing I can think of is maybe some more exciting features in the overworld. Like, oh, I'll tell you what, if they actually do another game set in Kalos, they need ride-on racing. That was the blatant missed opportunity. The fact that they mentioned that, oh, your mother was this amazing ride-on racer, and then we never see any bloody ride-on racing. Like, you can't just drop an awesome concept like that and then never use it again.
That's false advertising, Pokemon. I don't appreciate it. Actually, I agree with you on that one. We need ride-on racing. Mostly because I'm imagining, like, this awesome scene set to Ghost Riders in the sky, like, ride-on charging down the racetrack to the tune of Yippee-Yay!
Oh dear. And before anyone comments, yes, I know it's Rhyhorn Racing, not Rhydon Racing, but I only realised this mistake in post, so yeah, bear with us, please. So yeah, that's what you need to do at Nintendo.
Ride-on cow Oh my god, ride on cowboy, I just made a pun.
Oh, actually, since Kalos had Pokemon you could ride in the overworld, maybe we could ride our own Pokemon next time.
I mean, if in your party you have a Chesnaught or an Aggron, I don't see why you couldn't just clamber on top and ride.
Yeah, that would be fun as well. Oh, also, sorry, I keep being about to end this section and then having another idea pop in my head, but it might be a bit controversial, but I think it'll be much better in the long one. Having items that replace the HM moves.
Agreed. Because there is nothing more annoying in Pokemon than HM moves. For the most part, they are completely useless except for Surf and Waterfall. And they are a pain in the ass to get rid of.
Not to mention the fact that they're barely used for, like, I mean, Surf's like the only one you're using for large chunks of the game, like Surf and Fly. Otherwise, you got stuff like Cud, which is like used a lot at the start of the game, and then it just never gets used, and it's like a slot you have to waste with this really crappy move, and it's either that or you have to assign a specific Pokemon to be the HM slave, which just seems cruel if nothing else.
I agree. So, basically replace HM moves with, sensible items, like, I guess a bush knife for cutting down trees. You need a karate black belt for crushing boulders.
Maybe a big flashlight for Flash.
Yeah. And I have no idea what they would replace Waterfall with. And I'm not sure I want to know how that would work on a human.
Jet ski!
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. I am now picturing the Pokemon trainer jet skiing up the side of a mountain. That's the stupidest thing I've imagined all year.
Yeah, well, on that note, I can now pass on a question from a man who wants to try and top that acclaim.
Some men just want to watch the world burn. Our next question comes, obviously, from Toon Junkie.
I need to summon a nameless horror from beyond the end of time to do my laundry. What, in your opinion, is the best type of ink to use for drawing a summoning pentagram?
Well, my non-serious answer would be squid ink. Let's see. I think, actually, I've got it. The best ink would be the ink in those Biro pens.
Good answer. In the meantime, first of all, why would you summon a nameless horror from beyond the end of time to do your laundry? You could at least use it to make our presidential election make sense. Because, God knows that a nameless horror from beyond the end of time would probably be a better president than any of those schmucks. But I guess if you're that lazy, I think nameless horrors appreciate the blood used from sacrifices, so go out, find a goat, and have a good time. That sounded way better in my head.
Yeah, we'll swiftly move on to Toon Junkie's other question, and this is actually a response to a question we did a few months back. He was basically asking if you could cheat death by using the Death Note. I think it was something like, if you could cheat death by saying you'll die in 100 years. And we said something along the lines of, we don't think that's the way the Death Note works. You can only really write how the person dies rather than when they die. And he's come up with a counter question.
If you were to write in the Death Note that a man would die from being impaled by a rabid flamingo in the middle of a desert, would the Death Note warp reality itself to make your statement true?
I hope so, because Donald Trump has a date with a flamingo. You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't top that. I mean, I don't know enough about Death Note to say whether or not that's true, so yeah, go ahead and give it a try.
Oh, believe me, I will. Have fun setting that up, Ryuk.
Oh dear. So, yeah, on that really bizarre mental visual, we move on to our next section, which is
Reviews!
This is the section where we review something that we've read, watched, or played this month. Or in the case of our first subject, something that's been a long time coming. Sven, do you want to introduce this?
Well, after dodging around the issue since the ending of the last season, we've been trying to find a gentle way of saying what we have to say about this series, but I don't think there is one. So I guess now is as good a time as any to discuss Game of Thrones.
Yeah, we've mentioned this series a couple of times, often in occasional references, and here's the thing. When this series first started, we freaking loved it. For those who don't know, Game of Thrones is the TV series based on the Song of Ice and Fire books by George R.R. Martin. The best way to describe the series is fantasy War of the Roses, in that it starts focusing on House Stark and how they eventually move to take a larger part in matters of the throne, and the rest of the series is based around the political and sometimes gory maneuvers of House Lannisters, House Stark. What house did Littlefinger belong to?
Actually, his own, House Baelish.
Baelish, that's it. And many, many others in the constant quest in order to get the throne. Now, the series stood apart because, as well as the constant political conflict, there was also really well-written character stuff going on. All of the characters were complex, there was wonderful details of shades of grey, and there were so many characters you grew in love, and even if you hated them, you did have some kind of respect for them and wanted to see what happens. But the series is also infamous for loads of pointless violence and gore, and part of that gore includes killing off characters, thus creating an atmosphere where anyone can die next. And here's the thing, me and Sven decided a few months ago, with Season 5 about to start, to record a special spin-off show where we counted down our top 5 favourite and least favourite moments from Game of Thrones. But then Season 5 happened, and, well, Sven recorded a little follow-up which I am going to play now.
Howdy, folks. Sven here. This is a little addendum I'm recording after the fact, because at this point, given recent events, I think it's pretty clear that Jonin and I recorded this countdown before Season 5, Episode 9, because if we had recorded it after Season 5, Episode 9, I can't speak for Jonin, but I wouldn't have been there to record it. Season 5, Episode 9, folks, is, as always, the obligatory shock episode in every single season of Game of Thrones. And this time around, it is an insult to writing, to TV, and to storytelling, which would be bad enough on its own, but then I found out that it was sanctioned and requested by George R.R. Martin himself. Let me take a moment to address this man personally. Mr. Martin, there used to be a time whenever I held you up as one of my favorite authors with Terry Pratchett and Stephen King, but just about now, I'm done. I'm done with the show, I'm done with the books, I'm done wasting my life on this franchise, and most importantly, I am done insulting Terry Pratchett's memory comparing him to talentless, edgy wannabe hacks. Now, if you'll excuse me, folks, I'm going to go try and wash the taste left in my mouth by A Song of Ice and Fire out by reading Bleach and then drinking Bleach. Adios, folks.
So yeah, Season 5 may have changed some of our opinions.
Yeah, to say the least.
So, we're going to try our best to avoid spoilers, but unfortunately this has joined the ranks of Bleach and Naruto in a series we absolutely loved, and a series that inspired our writing, but then took a turn for the worse.
And to be honest, this one is the worst offender of all. Because if you go into shonen manga not expecting at least some level of cheesy, cliche campiness, you're doing it wrong. But Season 5 of Game of Thrones, you have to understand, came out of nowhere. Came out of nowhere. I did not fathom that a series so known for good writing could be so bad.
But before we focus on that, I guess we should focus on some of the positives. Like I said, the main strength of Game of Thrones is basically the cast. These are really well-written characters, and not to mention really diverse characters, because there are one or two which are homosexual, and there are also many strong women in the show. And when I say strong, I mean there are several definitions. I mean, you've got the, I guess you could say, masculine version of strong in the form of Brain of Tarth and Arya, who can kick several kinds of ass in their own right. Then you had characters like Cersei, who weren't really that strong in a fight, but my god, were they cunning and savvy.
Yeah, you're not just dealing with action movie strong, you're also dealing with strong in the super villain sense.
Yeah, exactly, and that was really the great part of it, and to be honest, that's why the gore and over-the-top sex scenes were always there, but you could honestly ignore most of that. And so I can't believe I've gone this long without mentioning Tyrion Lannister, aka the role that made Peter Dinklage a household name.
Yeah, also aka one of the only reasons I would even suggest anyone watch Game of Thrones after season 5, but we'll move on from that, keep talking positive.
Yeah, he is a really cheerful, positive character. He's one of the few people in Game of Thrones who's not only a really good person, but is actually able to play the Game of Thrones because he is actually really smart and can outmaneuver people, and that's really what you are watching Game of Thrones for most of the time. You were watching it just to see what twisted turns the plot would take and how these two characters would interact with each other and bounce off each other. Like, that's pretty much what set every season apart. Which character was going up against who, or in my case, is one of my favourite plot lines, which characters would pair up. Like, one of my favourite plot lines of, I think it was season 3, was when you had Brit of Tarth escorting Jaime Lannister back to King's Landing. Just because these are two characters who you would never expect to pair up or get along in any way, shape or form, but by forcing them to be with each other, you learn more about them and actually got to quite like them as the series moved on and the two of them actually started trying to help each other.
I would agree, and we kind of got the same effect in season 4 with Arya Stark and Sandor the Hound Clegane.
Yes.
It was always something with the character teams, I guess you could say, to see who would interact, who would go where, what plot lines would clash, etc. And that was always enjoyable.
Yeah, that was really the strong point of Game of Thrones. In fact, if you want to know why anyone likes Game of Thrones, check out Season 2, Episode 9, Battle for Blackwater. That is such a great episode from start to finish, and it's won many awards, and for good reason, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, even given my opinion of the show now, I would recommend checking that out because you could edit that episode into, like, a standalone feature.
Yeah, it's like the culmination of several storylines, but also the best way I could describe it without spoiling too much is a big invasion, but from the viewpoints of so many different characters. Like, you've got the soldiers on the ground level, you've got the viewpoint of the armies that are launching the attack, you've got the councillors developing strategies. It was just such a great episode, and from there on, we were wondering how the hell they could top this. But they really didn't.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the long and the short of it. After that point, it was downhill.
Yeah, okay, like I said, the gore and violence was always there, but there was a slight change. I mean, it's not like... Okay, when a main character dies, it is always treated as a tragedy in the show, but something seemed to happen with the creative staff. Okay, the only way I can go about this is I'm gonna tiptoe around spoilers as best as I can, but compare the execution in Season 1 to the events known as the Red Wedding. In that, both involve the shocking deaths of main characters. But here's the thing. In the execution, it's actually done pretty tastefully for the most part. Like, the guy's led to the rocks, all of the sound drains out. You just get a shot of the guy's face as he sees all of the people yelling. The sword raises up, and then you just see it fade to black, and You see the head being chopped off, but from a short distance away. There's no real focus on the gore, it's just focusing on the story moments and the tragedy that it is. The Red Wedding, on the other hand, it is comical how sadistic the filmmakers were. Like, they are actively trying to make these deaths as shocking as possible. Like, there is one moment when a pregnant woman gets killed, which is a tragedy in itself. But in order to ramp up the shock factor, the guy reaches round and tries to stab her directly in the belly, even though it's clearly very awkward for him to do so. And even though you'd think the one stab would do, almost like a wind-up toy, he does it multiple times, just to make sure,
Yeah, you know, and oh god, it really is like a wind-up toy. I'm just imagining a wind-up cymbal monkey here. Imagine that, if you will, with a knife, just...
And that's not even getting started on some of the more ridiculous scenes, including someone nonchalantly slitting someone's throat from behind, which, by the way, actually is pretty difficult to do.
Yeah, oh god. That might have been the most ridiculous part of a ridiculous episode.
Oh, no. For me, the most ridiculous part is when a mother lets out a terrifying bellow of grief and sadness watching her son die, whilst also cutting someone else's throat on the way down, and then a guy slitting her throat, but waiting appropriately for her to stop wailing, because of course if they just did it during that would just be that'd just be impolite.
Oh god, I hadn't even thought of it that way. So basically what we're getting at here is, in Season 1, this sort of thing was handled with, some tact and some legitimate shock value. In Season 3, it was nothing but shock value, and it got silly.
Yeah, and that's when it got round to Season 5, which, well, they ran into two problems. The first, and this one you can kind of understand, we were talking about Shonen stuff earlier, but this is kind of a similar problem. Because George R.R. Martin is infamous for taking forever writing each part of the books, the series, by the way, has not ended yet, they kind of ran into the problem that, well, they ran out of content. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, they ran out of book. It's as simple as that.
So, there was only like one or two main plot lines that are actually doing anything, and the rest... The only thing I can think of is a paraphrase of a Linkara joke. We should do something! Should we do something? We must do something! Should we do something? Over and over again.
Pretty much. Well put, Linkara.
Yeah, it's just... So, basically, a lot of the plots just ground to a halt or just went absolutely nowhere. Like, I mentioned that some of the fun parts were the character journeys. There is a journey with Jaime Lannister and, oh god, what's the guy's name? Braun?
Yeah, Braun.
Braun, that's it. And I was actually legitimately excited for that, but then it turned out to be a couple of minor scuffles, a few chats, and then it's over. It's done with.
Yeah, with, I might add, a completely pointless payoff.
Oh yeah, which, again, minor spoilers, involves shock death, because of course you've got to have shock death. Because here's the thing, the tits and gore, it was something you could pretty much deal with for the most part because the character writing was so good, but not only did the writing and the plot start to trickle down, to try and compensate for that, they ramped up both the tits and the gore in order to try and grab ratings, and you could really tell that's what the creators were doing at this point.
Yeah, this is the funny thing. I cannot think of one, actually I can think of exactly one death in Season 5 that actually happened in the books. One. And there were a lot of deaths.
Yeah, and I think that was also led to another problem. Like, you could argue about whether or not you should kill off characters, or whether or not it's more realistic that people can die at any time, and good guys don't always necessarily win. But there's also one big problem in that if you keep killing off your main characters but don't replace them with new ones, you run into the unfortunate problem that, well, the Game of Thrones, no one's really ready to take it because all of the big movers and shakers who were setting up the plot, they're either dead or rendered so ineffectual that they can't do anything. So, yeah, that's part of the reason why the plot kind of grounded to a halt. There weren't that many people left, or at the very least, people who are willing to actually do anything. I mean, a couple of seasons ago, I was really terrified of Littlefinger and was actually wondering, oh god, this Littlefinger guy, he looks cool, I wonder what he's going to do. And now in season 5, I'm thinking, wow, really? You're not doing anything, Littlefinger? The door's wide open, you know. I think you can outwit most of these people.
And it's true, the door is wide open, because thanks to all the rampant character death, which only gets worse in Season 5, Game of Thrones makes like Maple's story, and that there's no one left to play the game.
And that's really the problem with Game of Thrones. I remember talking about a certain death that happened in Episode 9, which made me feel uncomfortable with someone I know in real life, and they were saying, well, technically it wasn't as bad as the other things that have happened. When compared to all the other rapes and murders that have happened in Game of Thrones, why is that one a deal breaker for some people? To be honest, I think it's more just because everyone's kind of getting sick of it at this point. I mean, yeah, it's unexpected when a main character dies the first time round, but after 5 seasons of it...
Yeah, the unexpected has become the expected. For the worst reason possible, because, you heard my vitriol earlier, and I stand by it, but in the books, definitely serves a purpose. In the show, it is becoming rapidly clearer and clearer that death only serves to ramp up ratings. Except that backfired this last season, and rightly so.
Yeah.
Because this last season's episode 9 was an insult to TV.
Yeah, and what's even worse, that uncomfortable death, normally... Episode 9 tends to be, oddly enough, a lot more exciting than the season finale, because Episode 9 is always when the big event happens, and Episode 10 is just rearranging the deck chairs for next season. Episode 9, we had a very uncomfortable death, which admittedly, yeah, I saw coming a mile away when we were told, this contains violence, and scenes some people might find disturbing. And then there was one character getting a lot of screen time saying, I love you, I'll do anything I can to help. That was when alarm bells started ringing in my head. But again, something like this, you would think would be the cliffhanger of episode 9. The big shocking thing to end the episode on. Nope! Just barely paid attention to, like, oh, yeah, this person's dying in a really, really, really horrible way. But that's another one. Let's move on to Khaleesi and the dragons!
Yeah, focus on the dragons. Draw attention away from the worst thing we have ever written. Ever. No joke. Ever. It was insulting. It insulted my intelligence. It insulted TV writing. I'm pretty sure the people who wrote Breaking Bad are crying in their sleep.
Yeah, and you know what the worst part is? That uncomfortable death, I think I might have been able to tolerate. Might, if it contributed anything to the plot. That was the one thing you could say about the red wedding, the blue wedding, and even if you were feeling very, very generous, the black wedding, which by the way also happened in season 5, you would think that this would add something to the plot. No, instead it's just the reason for that entire family, anything that remains of it, to just be quickly wiped out during episode 10. It's like, okay, well, this person's died, I'm gonna make one last stand. Gone.
Pretty much. And for me, it only got worse whenever I looked into the episode on winteriscoming.net and found out that that entire sequence was sanctioned by George R.R. Martin himself. Which was why I went on that vitriolic rant in the first place and why I stand by it today. Because it made me come to a horrible realization. Not only do Weiss and Benioff not have a decent creative bone in their bodies, but it's become increasingly clear to me that George R.R. Martin is just the writing equivalent of a shitty edgelord emo teenager writing shitty fiction on his live journal.
Wow.
Like, Martin, here's the thing. J.K. Rowling pissed me off with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, but at least there was some payoff. At least characters could at least feasibly be happy. You do not have to shit on everything you've written to be a good writer. You do not have to take a gigantic dump on all the characters we've grown to love.
I guess it's what happens when you keep insisting that people die every single day. Yeah, okay, fine, but it doesn't always make for great stories, especially since now it just seems like all of these characters, they have targets on their heads.
And I'm going to interrupt this by saying that not only does it not make for good storytelling, it's also cynical bullshit. The world is not like this. We have laws. And for the most part, you can trust people to at least act in some way decent. This is not how people act. This is not how life is, you cynical bastard. So stop trying to claim this is realistic. This is bullshit.
Yeah, that's the thing. People will tell you that life is cruel and the world is filled with horrible people. But once you've expanded your horizons through other stories and observing people in real life, you realize it's just not true. Yes, horrible things do happen, but when you read stories about Japanese office workers pulling people out of the water in a tsunami, or the pedestrians in London who got together to lift a bus to save a cyclist trapped underneath it, you begin to realize that no, the world isn't like that. You can break this cycle, which is why I'm finding the world that George R.R. Martin has created less and less believable. So, yeah, Season 5 was kind of where the show dropped off, and now Sven is absolutely refusing to continue it, and I really don't know if I'm going to continue it or not, but only because in the same way Sven has a morbid curiosity around Bleach, I have a morbid curiosity around this.
That's the absurd thing, because I know how good this show was, despite everything I've said, despite completely closing out of George R.R. Martin. I'm still looking at the casting news. Why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah, I think because it was so good to begin with, you have that little bit of hope that maybe they can turn this around, that maybe they can have some big thing where it all pays off, but that hope is really, really diminishing. And now, I think if I do end up watching Series 6, I think it will mostly be kind of in the same sense I watched Ruby, really. Just going into it expecting it to be shite, but with the hope that it might actually do some good.
Really, if you're going to continue watching Game of Thrones, I think that's about as much you can expect.
I guess if you're someone who hasn't watched Game of Thrones and you're considering whether or not you should get into it, I would say at the very least, watch Season 1. That will give you the general basis of what the show is about and the overall tone it takes. And if it's all a bit too much for you, just step off right now. It's only going to get worse in Series 5. If you can stomach it, or you don't see what the hell our problem is, then have fun.
Yeah, honestly, if you want my opinion, if you're going to get into Game of Thrones, 1, God help you. 2, watch Season 1. If you like it, watch to Season 4, quit, and write your own ending. That is the best I can suggest at this point.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. So, okay, I think it's now time for us to move on to more positive things, and I'm going to move on to something that actually makes me a lot happier. We were talking about series of diverse casts, and I'm going to talk about a webcomic that has a cast about as diverse as it gets. I've been thinking about reviewing this one for a while now. To be honest, before this episode, I was umming and ahhing whether I would be reviewing this or Thunderbird 6. But then recently, one very, very crappy reviewer not only accused both the author and the fans of being trans-misogynist, I didn't realise that was a word, but also went on record to say they were going on a crusade to tell people how bad this comic was. Which I could not disagree with more. So, yeah, you mentioned that with Homestuck, you consider that author worthy of being alongside Terry Pratchett and George R.R. Martin. Of course, that was a while ago, so maybe it's just alongside Terry Pratchett.
At this point it is.
The writer of this comic, Jocelyn Samara, that would be my equivalent. I know it sounds like I'm gushing here, but she honestly is one of the best writers I've seen, or at the very least one of the best online writers I've seen. The series in question is a webcomic named Rain, which is hosted on DeviantArt and SmackJeeves. It's kind of weird, because it's a series I happened upon by chance, and it's not something I would normally read, given that it's basically a drama comedy set in a high school, but for whatever reason I kept reading and been following it ever since. The webcomic is based around the character Rain, who is a transgender, and the story basically follows her attempts to try and pass as a girl whilst at the same time living a high school life and interacting with her friends. And from there, the plot, like any high school drama, gets a little bit complicated with twists and turns and what have you. Which, again, I'm not going to spoil, even though that actually makes this review quite difficult to do.
That's always the complication of this section, I find.
Yeah.
Like me, trying not to spoil anything in Monstrous Regiment, by which I mean everything. Literally the whole book.
Yeah, the strength of this series, pretty much like Game of Thrones, is its cast, and that's generally where a lot of the plot and, more importantly, a lot of the humour comes from, because here's the thing, I'm a big sucker for character stories. Like, I will often forgive a really bad plot if the characters are really enjoyable. That's really the main draw of this series. You've got Rain and her collection of friends, and the story basically is the characters, how they interact with each other, how they deal with new arrivals, what happens when one character finally makes a move, etc, etc, etc. And as all of these things happen, the characters develop. And when I say the characters, I mean all of the characters, not just Rain herself, but the friends all go in interesting directions, and surprisingly, even minor extras you never thought would be important get their own development as well.
So that is basically like the best of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, basically. I mean, the one thing that can definitely separate it from Game of Thrones right now, aside from the fact that it's not a fantasy, is that it does not take itself too seriously. Like, the series does keep an upbeat tone, and it is willing to crack jokes every now and again. It's kind of hard to describe why it's funny, because a lot of the humour is the characters bouncing off each other, and some of the awkward moments that arrive from that. Like, the best example I can give is there's one situation where they're throwing a New Year's Eve party, and they're trying to get an old NES cartridge to work. I mean, admittedly, it's not called a NES, but that's basically what it is. Oh yeah, Funtendo, that was what they called it.
Working around the copyrights, I see.
Pretty much, yeah. And there's this one moment where they're trying the old trick of blowing into the cartridge to see if that does anything. Rain tries this and ends up blowing so hard she chokes, and then the person she's dating at the time goes, "Hey, Rain, do you want me to blow on it? I won't choke." And then there's an awkward silence as everyone just goes, "What?"
Oh, God!
That's basically what a lot of the humour in Rain boils down to. It's basically characters either being snarky or characters being put into really awkward situations like that.
So that's my kind of humor.
Yeah, basically.
Really awkward.
Yeah, that's actually a good way to describe it. It's a mixture of snark and really awkward situations, which and combine that with the art of the series is admittedly very simplistic. Like 90% of the backgrounds are bucket fills, but once the comic lacks in like background details, it makes up for with expressions, and oh boy, you get some hilarious expressions when stuff like that happens.
I could only imagine. By the way, it's just occurred to me, the way you described the tone the comic takes, snark and awkward situations, aka a story of Sven's life.
Yeah, it probably could, that, yeah. Oh dear. But yeah, the characters are a strong element of this, but as you probably guessed, it has a very diverse cast, especially, well, that was kind of obvious when I mentioned the fact that it's a transgender comic, and the thing is, even if you're like me, a white, cisgendered, straight guy, you can actually pick up something from this, because It's a semi-autobiographical comic, so it's based on the experiences of the author and the people she's encountered. So it manages to be educational, but still have enough reality and drama to stop it from being a PSA or an exposition dump. I mean, before I read this, I had no idea asexuality, pansexuality, or even gender fluid were things that existed, and yet, thanks to this, I now not only have a greater grasp, but can actually really understand and sympathize the struggles those types of people go through. So, even in the unlikely situation this comic goes down the crapper, I will at the very least be thankful to it that it has actually taught me that, yeah, these types of people exist, they're just as human as the rest of us, and, well, if anything, they're going through much harsher trials because of it.
Wow. Now, you could say almost anything else about the writing, but I think that in itself would be a worthy venture because, honestly, there are not enough series that do that, and, raise awareness in that way. I mean, I had to learn how to know about those things by going on Tumblr and reading what I could and hoping to hell I didn't get caught by a flying asshole ball.
Yeah.
So, honestly, I would say that's a good way to learn.
Yeah, it's a really great series for that. And yet, this is the really interesting thing. I mentioned the character development before, but the reason I call her a skilled writer is because she manages to do this without making it propaganda, for lack of a better term. Because, okay, not everyone accepts Rain right off the bat, and it would be so easy, so easy to basically go the James Cameron route and say the people who don't accept transgenders are 100% evil. They are cold, vile, heartless peoples with no joy or compassion in their soul. But what Jocelyn does is that she actually points out that, yeah, there are people who disregard transgenders and their thinking is often flawed, but at the same time, they are people too. These characters don't do so because they're completely evil. They do it because sometimes out of ignorance, sometimes because something's happened to them that make them try and justify it in their own way, and those characters get development as well, or at the very least get plot comeuppance. Like, one of the best examples I can give of this, and this is slightly a spoiler, but it's something that happens within the first 2 chapters, and it's not major game, so I think I can give this away. In the first chapter, we meet a character named Gavin, and he is one of 3 people who learns about Rain's situation, for lack of a better term. And his reaction is, what the hell, no way, I want no part of this, and just walks off in a huff. It would be so easy to turn Gavin into the series antagonist, and my god, if you actually read the comments of those issues, many people were. In fact, for the longest time throughout that period, his fan nickname was Jerky McJerkface. I'm not making that up.
Well, whenever you make an impression like that, you really can't help it. I mean, I'm thinking of Soren from Fire Emblem here.
Yeah, but here's the thing. They start off like that, but you stick with Gavin and you actually learn more about him, and it's actually kind of explained that the reason Gavin feels that way is because Gavin actually knew Rain when she was going as Ryan and was actually a school friend of theirs. So it's not a case of you're different, therefore I don't want anything to do with you. It's basically his childhood memories clashing with reality, and over time, as he continues to interact with Rain, he actually starts to feel guilty about it. And when him and Rain actually sit down and play this universe's equivalent of Battletoads, but mostly sit down and talk.
Bonding over Battletoads. Is there a lesson to be learned there? I don't know.
Well, there's a lesson to be learned in the fact that neither of them can beat it, but
yeah, it's Battletoads, alright.
But yeah, after like this long session of actually sitting down and talking through, they actually do manage to pair their relationship, and Gavin actually ends up becoming one of my favourite characters because he does try to provide Rain with moral support in his own kind of haphazard way. So to take someone who could have easily been a 2-dimensional villain and actually work it into like a fully realised character and one of Rain's best allies in that way, that takes tremendous skill as a writer.
Huh. It's like, I brought up Soren, and that's actually a good example, because anyone who's played Fire Emblem 9 can probably vouch for the fact that the first impression Soren makes of himself is an asshole, but after that point, he sort of develops into a more complex, likable character. And I get the sense that's what's happening here. It's also kind of the Jaime Lannister effect.
Yeah, pretty much. I guess the way you could go about it is kind of realistic, but in a more positive sense. In the fact that, yes, there are people who are going to reject transgenders, but they're not purely evil. They're people as well, and there are people who you can potentially reach. Granted, it doesn't always work, but even when it doesn't, you still at least get the sense of why they're doing this. They're not cardboard cutouts, they are actual people. And even if you're thinking, God, you're an idiot, what are you doing? You can at the very least see why they think it's a good idea. Like, the only characters who are outright caricatures are Rudy's parents, and honestly, they're played for dark humour. I should probably explain, Rudy and Maria are two of Rain's friends, and they're both gay, but at the start of the series, Maria is a closet homosexual, and the reason why is Rudy says that he tried to come out to their parents in order to show her that it was okay, and for the parents' reaction, the next panel is the father yelling down the phone, "I need an old priest and a young priest!"
Oh god. So basically it draws the line between ignorant people and Fred Phelps and plays the latter for laughs.
Pretty much, yes. But yeah, that kind of sums up the reason why I like this comic series so much, is because it has great character development, and it keeps up the line of realism without ever crossing into cynicism like Game of Thrones does. It basically says, okay, look, some horrible things are going to happen. You won't make friends with everyone right the bat, and honestly, it's going to be hard. But you have to keep at it because it will start to be alright in the end. Like, even when it does get into some darker plot twists, and when I say darker, I mean emotionally, thankfully no one's died yet.
Oh, thank God, I would hope not.
Yeah, even when it gets to the really darker twists, it does still show that characters can recover from it or find ways to cope with it. So yeah, that's a lot more powerful and a lot more, I guess you could say, fulfilling to see that kind of thing. Like, not to hide away or ignore these problems, but at the same time not saying there is absolutely no hope, everyone's going to be horrible forever. Looking at you, George.
Yeah, and given the subject matter, I think it would have been way easier, and honestly, given some of the experiences I've seen, almost justified, to go down that cynical route, but the fact that it doesn't is impressive.
So yeah, that pretty much sums up my thoughts on the series. It's still ongoing and it's still a really good comic. If you want something to read and you feel you want to learn a little bit more about this subject matter, I cannot recommend it enough.
Well, that's a solid recommendation then. I think I'll look into that.
Hooray!
I mean, granted, like I said, I've already learned about the subject matter because I was on Tumblr and had to dodge asshole baseball, but it never hurts to read a first-person account.
Oh, yes. And on that note, we'll now move on to our final section, which is
Quickfire Reviews.
This is the section where we review everything else we read, watched, or played, but within a maximum time limit of 60 seconds. Sven, do you have anything?
One thing.
Okie doke, and I don't think, have I actually seen anything? No, dear God, I haven't. Okay, so Sven, you are the sole person reviewing tonight, so
Wow, a lot of pressure on my shoulders.
Okie doke, yes, you better make it a good one or this entire show is being ruined.
Starbound, a third-person adventure exploration game in the style of Terraria/Minecraft. And speaking of Minecraft, I can tell you this much, Starbound is way more fun. I like Minecraft, but Starbound you can at least look forward to the exploration because there is always something new, whereas Minecraft is about the same 5 minerals over and over again. And plus it's sci-fi, which just adds an extra element for me. So basically, if you like sci-fi exploration and don't want to get wailed on like FTL, here's your thing.
Very good, you pass.
Oh, good. I wouldn't want to have to pay the iron price.
Oh dear. But yeah, and on that note, that brings us to an end of this Monkey broadcast. Once again, if you have anything you'd like to say about anything we've reviewed or discussed in the Q&A, then feel free to leave them in the comment section. That's what it's there for. But for now, it's time to sign off, so until next time, I've been the Jonin Monkey.
And I've been Sven the Crusader. Brace yourselves. Winter is coming. And so is school. I'm gonna go soft now.
That was Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show hosted by the Jonin Monkey and Sven the Crusader. If you feel you've been the subject of slander or that your copyright was misused, send an email to thejoninmonkey@yahoo.co.uk. For more news and media reviews, follow me on Twitter @thejoninmonkey and go to thejoninmonkey.podbean.com for previous podcasts and MP3 downloads. All music used belongs to the original owners. Until next month, have fun, kids!